Ambassador, thank you very much for having the possibility to talk to you here in our studios. Welcome again. You are leaving Portugal. What is the what do you make of your 3 years in Portugal here, and relations with the different authorities and the Portuguese people during your tenure here?
First of all, thank you for having me here again. It's always a pleasure. Yes, I'm leaving after 3 years because it's the end of my term, going back to Israel. And I must say that arriving here, I didn't know too much about Portugal and too much about Portugal-Israel relations. And I'm living here understanding that the potential for both sides, for the Israeli side and for the Portuguese side, from this growing relations between us is huge. And I think we are starting to get more and more of this potential. And I'm sure those relations between our two countries will keep growing because the Portuguese people and the Israeli people, we are similar in so many ways. That's why me and my family, we really feel at home here. And many Israelis feel at home here. We are both the weather, the food, the environment, the nature of the people. When you'll be in Tel Aviv, I think you will feel exactly the same kind of feeling of home that we feel here. So that's why I think Israelis like Portugal so much, and Portuguese people, many of them that I've spoke with, like Israel so much, and those relations will keep growing.
Do you think the majority of Portuguese people enjoys Israel?
Yes. First of all, I think it's two separate questions. First of all, the relations, what is the reaction of Portuguese people toward Israel? And second question, probably that you didn't ask yet, but you're heading there, it's regarding the war itself. So I will start with the second question, because we are conducting polls from time to time, especially after the war started in October 7, and I saw also polls that Portuguese media have taken since then, and you see constantly that the support that Israel receives from the Portuguese street is higher than the other side, and it's still very, very stable. And I feel it everywhere I go in Portugal, and people I speak with, and member of parliament, and member of the government, I feel the support because I think there is understanding from the Portuguese side that we share the same values, that we are both democratic countries that believe in freedom of speech, freedom of right to minorities, to LGBT community, to everyone, and that's why we are the same. We might have differences or argument about how to conduct some areas of the wars, but in the core, we are the same. And that's why I think there is a huge support at the street toward Israel. So that's regarding the war itself.
Mm-hmm.
But more than that, I speak with Portuguese people that come and visit Israel, and they love it, and they feel at home. And I speak with Portuguese business people that wants to do business with Israeli companies because they understand that they can gain a lot from that. And they can gain a lot from the Israeli technology and from the Israeli inventions and in the areas of water and industry and medical technology and cybersecurity and so many. And it's also from the other side.
Don't you recognize the political environment could better foster this even economic relation between the two countries?
I think that at the end of the day, the people-to-people relations between countries is stronger than any political system in any country as it is. And the people-to-people between Israel and Portugal is very, very strong. And we will need to work for that to be even stronger because it's increasing. It wasn't like that 20 years ago, and it wasn't like that 10 years ago. And I'm sure that 10 years from now, it will be even more stronger.
I don't think people have the idea, but you surely have some numbers for us. What is the amount of investment, of Israeli investment in Portugal? I mean, probably the real estate sector is really in flourishing right now.
It's very hard to follow. I can give you some numbers. Look, the trade between Israel and Portugal, it's about $500 million. But that's not enough, and that's going and growing. I'll tell you why. Because the traditional trade between Israel and Portugal was agriculture. And now the agriculture will keep and should stay there because that's what we should keep, in order for those businesses to keep running. But on that, we need to add the issue of technology, mainly. The issue of real estate, it's something else. Also, most of them, it's not an Israeli companies. It might be Israelis who move to Portugal and open companies here, but that's not Israeli company. I'm talking about
technology.
Israeli company. Now, in addition to agriculture, we need to add the technology. And we see it already happening. And we're already working with cities like Lisbon and Porto and Braga and others in order for more Israeli startups to work with Portuguese companies. And we start seeing it flourishing.
Do you leave Lisbon with the desire to establish a final business, or there is the next project you would like to see, in place from the Israeli investments in Portugal?
There are so many things and fields to do. Last week I visited the Azores Island, and the thing that we can do together, and we are starting to, between our universities, because in the Azores Island you have a very good academy that teaches and studies and investigate and research the issue of blue economy. That's something that in Israel we are starting now to develop more, and more startups are starting to work. So we need to talk to each other and to work together. And we have some experience in the issue of water technology that some areas in Portugal are suffering, especially in Alentejo and in the Algarve. We can give you and share with you our experience and our results and our companies that are already been doing that. So I think there is so much that we can do. And the potential, as I said before, is huge, and we will keep investing in that. And I think you will see it coming in the next few years.
On the other side, about war and so on, not only war, but do you recognize some kind of communication challenge for the state of Israel regarding Portuguese people in its way of seeing Israel?
Look, Israel is not at the top of the agenda of the Portuguese people and the Portuguese headlines, and I can understand that. It's we're a small country in the Middle East.
Daily in the news we talk about Israel.
But that's only now because of the you're talking in general. I can understand that, but I think that we are both country. We have some connection that it's an historical connection, but also emotional connection that has been there for the last few hundred years. And there is a story in Portugal about the relations to the Jewish community and about the relations to Israel. And the Israelis and the Jewish community all around the world is starting to reveal and to learn about this story. And you see here today more and more tourists coming from Israel and from America also to learn about this story of the Jewish communities that were there and the Jewish history of Portugal. And the Portuguese people are welcoming those tourists in order to share this story and to reveal more about the history. They are not ashamed of the history. Of course they are ashamed of the history, but they are not trying to hide it. That's what I meant. And that's why you will see here more people coming here from Israel and more people from Portugal hosting them. And that will also assist a lot in those relations between the people to people. And on the other way, you will see the Israelis also hosting them back in Israel.
We had this dual citizenship process with the Jews in Portugal. Do you feel that Portugal as a country and government, and former government and present government, is doing well enough in terms of defending this Israeli community with connections with Portugal? Of course, we saw this during this war since October 7th, with all these, for example, hostages with Portuguese citizenship. Do you think Portugal has done enough?
It's a good question. I don't get into the issue of the law, the Sephardic law itself, regarding how it should be done or things like that, because I don't think me as a foreign country needs to preach to a different country which law they should have or shouldn't have. I don't want Portugal to interfere in our laws of who we give nationality to. But I would say a few things. Number one, once this law passed, today we have about 50,000 Israelis with the Portuguese nationality living in Israel. And that's very significant. And I think if we look for the main reason why did the relations between Israel and Portugal change in the last year, probably this is the main reason. And how do I see changes in the relation? It's not only that today you go to Israel and you say you are from Portugal, almost everybody either been there or know Portugal and will ask you questions. It's not like 15 years ago that they would not even know too much about Portugal. The best way to show you that I'm correct just happened to see what happened here in the last few years in regards to direct flights. We had 0 direct flights between Tel Aviv and Lisbon and Tel Aviv and Portugal. And before the war, before October 7, we got to 18 weekly direct flights between Israel and Portugal. Most of them to Lisbon, some to Porto, and also it was supposed to launch new lines to Madeira and Azores. Now, 18 weekly direct flights, that's a huge number. We are only a 10 million people country, you're only 10 million people country, and still those numbers, the flights were completely full. And today, after the war, because the flights are coming back slowly, now we have about 2 daily flights. And it will grow back to the 18 and maybe even more than that in the coming few months, because it shows you, first of all, the potential, and also that people from Israel and people from Portugal wants to go and visit each other. They are interested in each other. They want to visit there. They are interested. They want to do business together. They want to visit the places. And I think the direct flights is the best way to prove that.
I know, but my question was about, is Portugal doing enough with these Israeli citizens with dual citizenship with Portugal?
So that's a question to ask your ambassador in Tel Aviv, because it's his problem. He needs to deal with the Portuguese community.
Your perspective, I'm asking.
He needs to deal with this Portuguese community in Israel. Yes, we found ourselves in a situation, I think, that was new for us and was new for you as well. The hostages issue also puts Portugal on the very sad map of hostages that has other nationalities and Portuguese nationality. We had about 10 with a Portuguese connection. And that's why you saw here in the last year, we had 4 delegations of hostages' family coming to visit Portugal in order to meet with your government and to meet with your member of parliament, to meet with your president, and ask them to do whatever they can in order to assist them to call for the release of their loved ones. Now, for me, as the ambassador of Israel, I don't care what the nationality is. All of them need to be released. And me, as the representative of the government of Israel, needs to do whatever we can to release them, because they need to be released.
I see, but the hostage family, they ask that to the Portuguese government, and the Israeli government asks that too?
We ask all the governments around the world to do that, not only the Portuguese government, because we want to see international pressure on Hamas through some of those other countries that can affect them to call for the release of the hostages. We will keep pushing them military, diplomatically, but also the international community needs to have a very firm stand in order to call for the release of the hostages.
For people to understand, how many hostages still remain in Portuguese citizenship?
First of all, there are 120 hostages who are still in captivity.
Mm-hmm.
Out of them, there are 10 with Portuguese connection.
At the moment?
At the moment.
But you had some fatalities in this process.
Yes, unfortunately.
Do you have information that these fatalities were like inevitable in each case you found in that territory? Could you give us more information about it? It was possible to somehow save these lives in other perspective?
It's a very difficult question to answer, because we are at war, and each operation that goes successfully, as we saw also in the last few months, that we saw a successful operation to release 3 of the hostages, or unsuccessfully, each one of them needs to be learned and investigated. And we are doing that in order to learn from that. We need to do whatever we can to release that. And as you know, there is now a suggestion for the release of the hostages and also for a ceasefire that was presented by also by President Biden, and we agreed to that. And there are negotiations about it, and I really hope that, as I said before, also with the assistance also of the international pressure, the Hamas will accept those terms, and those 120 innocent people, because they are innocent people, will be released, and things could come back to see some normality and quiet in the region.
Some hostages with Portuguese citizenship were released. I'm not asking you details about the negotiation. I'm just asking if is it true that there was any kind of Portuguese intervention in this process?
I cannot comment on that. That's a question to ask your government.
But it was conducted by the Israeli government.
But that's a question to ask your government. It's not for me to answer.
Also on the bilateral relation, there was a change of government. Did it change the Portuguese position in terms of the Israeli point of view?
I don't see any changes in the relations between the Portuguese government and Israel. I think the previous government and the current government are both very clear in their support to Israel's right to defend itself and to find a solution, to call for the release of the hostages and to find a solution in order to get to a ceasefire. I think both governments have said it very firmly.
There is one person very important, which is António Costa, who was the prime minister. Now he's going to be the president of the European Council. There was some articles being written about António Costa, some critics from some part of the Jewish community in Portugal. Is there any complaint you have on the figure on the personality of António Costa?
I think that what was published a few weeks ago by some elements in the Jewish community in Porto is completely ridiculous. I don't see any kind of anti-Semitic behavior by him, exactly the opposite. When he was a mayor of Lisbon, he was a good friend of the Jewish community, and when he was a prime minister, and his support also to Israel after October 7th was noted very well. So I don't stand behind those ridiculous...
What do you expect from him as the president of the European Council? What does Israel expect from him?
The first thing that we expect from any international organization is to be fair. And we see today more and more unfair behavior and unfair judgment of Israel in those international organizations. The second thing, to make sure that the EU stand by Israel as they should stand by Israel, because we are on the same side and because understanding that Israel is fighting a war against terror, which is the same war that any EU country and any Western democratic free world country is fighting. And we expect them to stand by us when it comes to that. And the third thing is to continue the good and important relations that Israel has with the EU.
I see, but we know the now, again, President of the European Commission was very vocal in support of Israel since the first minute of this war. But Mr. Costa and previously Mr. Michel come from a different political family in Europe. Do you expect Mr. Costa to maintain the stance of, for example, Mrs. von der Leyen in terms of this subject?
From the very small, short experience I have with Mr. Costa, I expect him to be Mr. Costa and not take any examples, no from Mr. Michel and not from Mrs. von der Leyen.
Who is Mr. Costa for you?
I think he is a decent person that will come to his job and will continue. Again, now you're asking me about his reaction to Israel. He understands the importance of relations with Israel in peacetime and in wartime, and he will continue going. I hope he will continue to go by that line, and that will be the line of the EU, as it should be.
But during his tenure as a prime minister, he also stressed the importance of the proportional response from Israel in terms of Gaza situation.
Okay, but Again, the war in Gaza, from our perspective, is very proportional. And the war in Gaza, as I said before, it can end in 5 minutes. The pressure doesn't need to be on Israel. It needs to be on the other side. We have 3 goals for that war to end. The first one is to make sure that Hamas will not have his capabilities anymore and will not be there as the governing of the Palestinian people there. The second thing, to bring back the security for the people of Israel, so those people, the Israeli people, could go back to live in their houses, because as you know, we have almost 150,000 Israelis who had to evacuate their houses in October 7th, almost 10 months, and didn't come back yet because it's not safe. And the third thing is to release the 120 hostages. Once those 3 demands will be achieved, and by the way, in this proposal that I've mentioned before, we are achieving those 3 goals, this war will be over.
The third factor about the hostages, you have almost weekly or daily demonstrations in Israel from the families. There are many criticism about Israel conducting these operations.
You want me to apologize that Israel is a democratic country? I will never do that. I think I'm very proud that Israel is a democratic country and people can go to the streets and demonstrate on issues like the hostages, which is very understandable, why families will go and demonstrate for that, and also for other reasons. And yes, there are disagreement in the Israeli society how the government should handle this hostages deal. But at the end of the day, as I said before, we're a democratic country. People can demonstrate, but there is also a government that needs to decide and take the decision, and hopefully we'll find the best solution.
And the first factor was Hamas, you said, and dismantling Hamas. Are you near that objective?
We're not far from that objective. It's not an easy task because it's not only military. I think we are not far from there, but it's also an ideology issue.
Rephrasing, is it possible?
I think it is possible, but it's a process. It has to be in stages, and we cannot do it by ourselves. Once we will achieve the goals of the war, and we will have to work together. Israel doesn't want to stay in the Gaza Strip. If anyone thinks that we want to rule the Gaza Strip, completely the opposite.
Gaza Strip is destroyed.
Gaza Strip is not destroyed.
Not destroyed?
It's not destroyed, and you still have 2 million people living there, and
in very harsh conditions, you understand.
And that's why it needs to be rebuilt. That's fine. The Palestinian people will stay there, but we need to work together with the international community to make sure that the Palestinian people in Gaza will have the right government there that will govern there, a government that believes, first of all, in the needs of the Palestinian people and not in violence, a government that believes that will handle, for instance, all the humanitarian assistance in the right way and not as a hostage thing, and a government that believes that the Palestinians and the Israelis should live one by side and not encourage incitement all the time.
You're asking for a regime change in Gaza.
There will be a regime change in Gaza.
Do you think bombing is the best way to change a regime?
If I think bombing is the best way, no. I think it's a process. The bombing and it's all a process of step by step. The first step is to take down the military activity of Hamas. And that's what this bombing that you're referring to is doing. To take down, it's not against the Palestinian people, it's not against Gaza, it's against the Hamas terrorists.
Many people doubt that it's effective enough to take down and dismantle Hamas, the terror organization.
I encourage and invite those people to come and explain to me, proving by history, if there is a better way to do that, because I don't know of any better way. That was the way to defeat ISIS. That was the way to defeat Nazism, and that is the way to defeat any terror organization.
But you're asking for bombing. You think that's the better way, bombing?
No, I'm asking of taking down Hamas militant, taking down the terrorist. That's how you do it, and that's the first step. The second step is to build the right government for the Palestinian people, as I said before.
But you want, okay, it's 2 questions. One, I'm rephrasing my first question about how near you are. You have a percentage of how much did you dismantle in terms of Hamas organization?
Yes, almost more than 80%. We're talking about the last main headquarters of Hamas is in the area of Rafah, where we knew that there were still 4 battalions over there, and that's why we went to this operation in Rafah. And I think we are getting toward at least the first step that I was mentioning before to achieve it.
And secondly, the change of government. Israel is going to vote for something. Isn't it for the Palestinians to get their own? They are free to understand what's the best solution.
Okay, but in the democratic process, as you know, and as we learned from history, there should be some rules. Because also Hitler was chosen in a democratic process. Still, there should be some rules in order to make sure that someone like Hitler will not be chosen again as a head of a country. Also for Hamas, you can say that they were chosen democratically in 2005 when they took over the Gaza Strip. Mm-hmm. But since then, as you know, there were never elections in Gaza anymore for almost 20 years. And they killed all the Palestinian Authority people in order to make sure that they won't have any opponent.
It's difficult to make elections on the rubble.
I'm talking about since 2005.
And now, at the moment?
Not now. So I'm not talking about having an elections now. First of all, make sure Hamas is out of the picture, then work together with the international community, together with Egypt, with Saudi Arabia, the UN, the US, everyone, in order to have someone to rule in Gaza, to assist, start rebuilding the place and the trust of the people, and then we can start thinking about the next steps in order to have a better government and elections.
I'm talking about the election because one other thing that Israeli points out is the democratic context of the Palestinian Authority. They don't have elections for a long time. And when we talk to people in Ramallah, they say it's impossible to make elections because of the impossibility of making a proper census, even not only the Gaza situation, but also the East Jerusalem way. Could Israel help the authority to make elections and make census, the proper regulations, and to ease the situation in order to make elections?
Let's be honest, because as you know, the Palestinian Authority didn't go to elections since almost 20 years because they knew that if they will go to elections, it's a risk for them, for Hamas to take over also the West Bank. And if it would have taken also the West Bank, that would be the end of the Palestinian Authority.
That way you are recognizing Hamas is a very strong political organization in
because
Palestine.
When the Palestinian Authority, for the last almost 40 years, didn't sell any future for the Palestinian people, it was a corrupt government that just all the time dealing with going around the world and talking about how they should sue Israel in the international courts, instead of helping the Palestinian people, instead of selling them a future. They were supporting Palestinians, terrorist families. They were supporting incitement in the books, in the study books of the teachers, instead of working with Israel on a better future for the Israelis and the Palestinians. Abu Mazen, he's been the leader there almost forever. He was all the time opposing coming to the negotiation table and sitting and discussing with the Israelis' future. I remind you that in 2000 and in 2007, twice he rejected an offer that was on the table in order to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Because this is the Palestinian Authority. So I can't blame the Palestinian people for being very frustrated. Now, I hope that there will be a new generation that will rise for the Palestinian people that will be able to govern the Palestinian with future, with hope, with understanding that Israel will be there. So we need to sit together and solve this conflict between us, not through the UN and the ICC and the EU and others, but Israelis and Palestinians sitting together at a negotiation table and solving the conflict.
Returning to Hamas, the goal is to dismantle the operation in Gaza, but they exist in exile. What will you do about it? Kill the masterminds outside Gaza?
That's a question to leave for the cabinets. But as you know, most of the Hamas militants and the terrorists and the archi-terrorists, they sit in Gaza Strip. Sinwar, who is the head of the Hamas military branch, and he's the mind behind October 7th terror attack. He sits in Gaza. And Mohammed Def, who is the chief of staff of Hamas, also behind October 7th, he was sitting in Gaza, but we took him down a week ago. And once Hamas in Gaza will be defeated, it will affect also those who sit outside of Gaza. But that's another request from the International Committee. Understand that this is a terror organization and make sure that you sanction them. Don't let them travel around the world. Don't let them behave like, they're okay. No, they're not okay. They're criminals and they should be treated like that. And by the way, that's also according to Portugal definition. You also define them as a terror organization. So all of us needs to treat them as terrorists. They should sit in their houses and not get out from there forever. Because once they will get out, they will either go to jail or to heaven or hell.
Of course, for Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah, and so on are commanded by Iran. That's the Israeli position. You have now a change with a new president. Some analysts say it's a reformist. What do you expect, Israel? What does expect from this president in the Iranian architecture of power? Let's see.
I don't see a real change in Iran. I hope there will be a change in Iran because Iran has very good people, citizens living there that understand that they also been taken as hostages by the Ayatollahs. But right now, the change of president doesn't change the regime and doesn't change the regime ambition to create chaos around the world. And when you look around the world, Iran is involved in everything that is bad going around the world. They're involved in terror organizations and terror activities in Latin America, in Europe, of course in the Middle East. They're involved in the war between Russia and Ukraine, helping Russia against Ukraine. And they're involved in our region, assisting financially, military, and commanding also the Hezbollah in the north, the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, the Iranian troops inside Syria, and also the Houthis in Yemen, which is becoming a huge problem for all of us, affecting the route of the ships that are going there.
And then about Houthis, I must ask you this. As last time you were here, after the October 7th, I asked you about this, and you said we are ready to defend ourselves in as many fronts that we have to do it. Like I was asking about, for example, the Lebanon border and so on. Well, we see some attacks from the Lebanon side, but mounting to this criticism about some security failure on October 7th, as you may understand, you found that a simple drone can attack Tel Aviv, came from far away, really far away from the Houthis. Isn't that a concern that there are some challenges in terms of defense of Israel?
Yes, specifically that drone was it's still being investigated by our Air Force. There was some technical failure there that is being checked.
In the dome? And are you talking about
in the area of protecting Israel from this kind of threats, and it will be checked. But when you look at the last 9 months, Israel has been attacked from the Houthis with more than 200 drones and ballistic missiles in the last 9 months. And I remind you also this night that Iran decided to attack Israel with more than 350 drones and ballistic missiles.
And there was a early warning.
And that's what I'm saying. And our systems in protecting ourselves from this kind of attacks were working pretty well. So in this specific example that you've mentioned, that there was some failure there, some mistake that will have to be investigated to see what happened there that didn't work like it worked in previous times.
That I can rephrase my question from October. Are you really ready to defend yourself from all this kind of fronts?
We're already doing that, as you could see. There is a war in the north, there is a war in the south, there is a war with the Houthis. We are trying to do whatever we can in order to avoid those wars, not because we cannot fight, but because we prefer to find diplomatic solutions to this kind of wars. And we don't want to be dragged to this kind of wars. But once they are attacking us and giving us any other options, we know how to act back and to make sure that they will have to think twice before attacking us again.
But are you expecting...
And I think what you saw last Saturday, it's exactly that message that was sent to the Houthis.
Are you expecting, other than the Houthis, the Lebanon front to increase activity while you say that you are almost accomplished your mission in Gaza?
I hope not. And as I said before, we are trying to avoid it for a very long time. But it might get to a point that the Hezbollah will not give us any other option, because every day there are attacks coming from Lebanon toward the northern of Israel. The reason you don't hear about it too much is because we evacuated most of the people from the houses and because we have a very good defense system. But it cannot last forever. And we are trying, again, through diplomatic channel to make sure that the Hezbollah will go back to the 1701 UN resolution and move to the northern side of the Litani River. And if it will not happen and those attacks will continue, we will be there in order to defend ourselves. We will not have another October 7th coming from the north.
After the tragedy, the Holocaust and so on, international law was very important for Israel, and international courts also. You now have a decision that is not binding, I must say, from the International Court of Justice about the end of occupation of the Palestinian territories. As soon as possible, the judges say. Why don't you abide to that?
First of all, the advisory that the ICJ talked about last Friday, it's not an obligated decision. It's advisory. I tell you what's the problem with the ICC and the ICJ, because you said rightly so that those organizations were formed after the Holocaust, and for a good reason. And the reason for them to be established was exactly the right and very noble and the right one. But what happened to them in the last 30 years is just so unfortunate, because it made those organizations more political, and the whole idea that was behind them just vanished. And today, you look at those organizations, there is a reason why also the US is not a part of the ICC. There is a reason for that, because it became a political game. And Israel is the best football that you can play with in this political game. That's how they feel, and that's the pressure that they get from all the international organizations around them. The most ridiculous thing I would talk with you about is Iran today is the president of the Human Rights Council. Iran, the same country that doesn't let women or kill women that don't cover their head.
So you don't trust UN?
It's not that I don't trust. I'm very disappointed with the way it's conducted, and something very crucial needs to happen in order to change the way this system is working. It makes no sense that even before the war, 75% of the resolution every year of the UN are against Israel, a democratic country in the Middle East, not in time of war, in time of peace.
You have votes on UN.
Yes.
It's not someone that dictates, it's voting systems.
Yes, but if the UN would like to have a resolution tomorrow that Israel says that the sun rises in the morning, in the night, that if tomorrow morning someone will say that there is a resolution that Israel says that the sun rises in the morning, also most of the countries will vote against us, because there is, in the structure of the UN, it's already structured in a way that always everything will be against Israel, and that makes no sense. And something has to change in the way this system is working, and I hope it will happen soon, because it's ridiculous.
António Guterres is the same political family of António Costa, is a Portuguese one. Do you stand by your criticism by Israel about the way the Secretary General is making its point of view about Israel and the situation on the ground?
My criticism toward António Guterres is not because he's from Portugal and not because he's from the PS. My main criticism toward him is because he is the Secretary General of the United Nations. And I would expect him to behave like that and to be very, very careful in the way he handles all the issue of the war in Israel right now. And I think he didn't do it in a way that I would expect him to do that, and that's unfortunate.
Do you think it's understandable that, but you understand that there are many people, many countries, many civil societies demanding, for example, the recognizing Palestine as a state, and it was on voting in UN also. We don't see any steps that can drive to that final status. It's more urgent to complete the situation in Gaza, and then you deal with the final status of Palestine.
Look, just to conclude the issue of the UN, as we said before, October 7th was the worst terror attack I think in the modern history, even more than 9/11, because in numbers, proportionally, it's like 39/11 that happened in Israel. And still, the UN didn't pass even one resolution that condemned Hamas for October 7th. Even one. They condemned us for everything since October 7th. But even one resolution to condemn Hamas. We have proofs of murder, of rapes, of kidnapping babies, and you don't condemn them? That's like the basic thing to do. So that shows you something about the hypocrisy of the UN and why the system, something is very, very, very wrong in the way the system works at the UN. That's about that. Regarding the Palestinian state, I must say I can't understand the idea of recognizing now a Palestinian state. I can understand those countries who think that they should support Palestinian state. I can understand.
It was a goal far
yes,
side.
But I can't understand now recognizing Palestinian state. It's so wrong because it's not the right time. Because to do it now, as you say, it was for a long time. But to do it now, not to wait another few months after the war will end, not to do it before the war, but now to do it, it's a price for Hamas. You did the worst ever terror attack. Let's recognize the Palestinian state. It's the worst timing I could ever think of. So the timing I cannot understand. The second thing is the issue of the way. How do you do that? Yeah, we decide that we recognize Palestinian state. With all due respect, Palestinian state will not be decided in Madrid and will not be decided in Dublin, not even in Lisbon. It will be decided between the Israelis and the Palestinians. The only way for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to end is for Israelis and Palestinians to sit together and solve it. So what does it help you to recognize it? So the way is not correct. And the third thing is, what does it mean to recognize now a Palestinian state? You, by yourself, you say that there is a division between the West Bank that ruled by the Palestinian Authority and Gaza that ruled by Hamas.
There are three areas, A, B, C.
So what is a Palestinian state? Gaza is a part of the Palestinian state. So you recognize Hamas, a terror organization, by your definition, as the head of a state? That's what you're telling me right now? And
I'm not telling you nothing.
No, I'm not talking about you specifically. I'm talking about those countries. To remind you, Portugal didn't recognize Palestinian state. So my complaints are not to Portugal. I think Portugal is going by the right way. But those who are recognizing it, who do you recognize? You recognize a government of a terrorist group that you recognize as a terrorist group to be a head of a state. So I really cannot understand this idea of running and rushing right now to recognize a Palestinian state.
Finally.
Wrong time, wrong way, and wrong partners.
Finally, we are waiting for what happens in the United States. Do you think that with the Trump administration, the focus on Israel could change a little bit?
Let me first say that I want to say that I would like to recognize the very strong bonding and relations that we had with President Biden, because he just decided that he's retiring after this presidency. And I think he's one of those his heart was in the right place and standing by us all over the years, since the 70s, and especially in the last 10 months, was very appreciated by the Israelis. And I really thank him for that. Number two that I want to say is that the relations between Israel and the U.S., and I served in the U.S., so I have some perspective, are very, very strong. It's not some bilateral relations between two countries. It's in the core of Israel and the core of America, the relations between Israel and the U.S. for many reasons. And they are really unbreakable, no matter who will be the prime minister in Israel and no matter who will be the president in America.
Is Vice President Kamala Harris different from President Joe Biden?
Of course she will be different. Everybody is different.
From what do you know from the American side?
Everybody is different. She will bring something. She will bring herself, But we've been working with her also for the last, I would say, 10 years, even before she became vice president, when she was senator and when she was attorney general in California. But I'm saying that it doesn't matter if it will be a Democratic president or a Republican president. Those relations between the two countries will remain unbreakable and very, very strong. It's completely different than what we learn in the diplomatic world about bilateral relations between countries. It's something much more deeper than that.
I know, but we have a different situation because Trump was president before, and there was a proposal of a plan like the Peace to Prosperity, and that was not very efficient. Would you understand? Would you agree with that?
I don't know if it was efficient or not. I know that at the end of the day, it did brought us the Abraham Accords, the peace agreements between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, and the peace agreement between Israel and Morocco, and with Bahrain. So I'm not sure it wasn't very efficient. I think it was very efficient. Now, his plan is talking also about ending the conflict between Israel and Palestinians. I'm not against ending the conflict. It's my interest to end the conflict with the Palestinians. I want my children to live in a peaceful country.
But you are expecting a different Trump approach on this situation if he's elected president?
I don't know, because we'll have to wait for him to come and see exactly where he stands. But I have no doubt that either it will be him or someone else from the Democratic Party. The interest of Israel will be at the top of their priorities.
And the name of the Secretary of State is very important for Israel?
Everyone in the U.S. administration, from the president downward, is important for us because of those relations that we have with America.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.